We'd like to get into this recent case with Shirley Sherrod, who was a member of the Department of Agriculture that recently resigned under pressure because of some misstatements or misunderstandings of some statements that she had at an NAACP lecture. And one of the things I think is very interesting about this is that we did have several people jump to conclusions based on snippets of her lecture and didn't really give the full perspective of what she was lecturing about. James, do you want to start out by giving us a little bit of background on that?
Well, it seems that, Ms. Sherrod was simply talking to the NAACP and trying to give an overall background to her own experience and talk about how, through her own terrorized life, having seen and known of her father being murdered when she was 17 by a local white farmer who never faced prosecution, and how the daily humiliations of being black in segregated America was something she had to struggle through, and to sort of try to forgive, heal, and reconcile. And as she encountered a white farmer's troubles, she, living in the segregated South, did what she was supposed to do in keeping in her place as a Negro woman, which was to refer this white man to a white lawyer and to, basically give him a modicum of assistance, not doing too much. And then she ultimately, gave that talk. It was snipped and cut and pasted by someone, some mysterious person, that it ends up all over the internet and on all of the cable networks. And then now we have the White House and the NAACP and Fox News and everyone else jumping the gun on this most beautiful sister who has been in the struggle since she was a teenager as a member of SNCC. And what is most devastating to me is that she finds herself in this position when she's a victim of racism, and she grew up in this experience, and now she's being called a racist because she's talking about that experience. And I think finally, the thing that her story exposes that will not get talked about, because we're often beat up as black folk and told, let's not talk about slavery. Slavery happened so long ago, it's irrelevant. Well, let's not talk about slavery for a moment. But there are thousands, indeed hundreds of thousands of black living Americans who lived under segregation. And she is an example of that, who is as someone who overcame. And now in telling the story of how she overcame, her father being murdered like a dog in the streets, being, a father who had a child born 2 months after he was dead, he now somehow, in this new reality of post-racial America, he now is the racist, where her father was murdered. And I think we have to interrogate what this all means for us. And her case, I think, exposes a lot of things about the Obama phenomena in modern society.
It's interesting because when the nightly news come on, it's like synchronized news. Everything and everybody says the same thing the same way, an exact same sequence of stories. And that story played out the same way on the evening news. So if you didn't know any better and you didn't investigate, you would have thought that, she really was a racist in those kinds of contexts that they, presented. And it's real unfortunate, but hopefully now that she's been redeemed, it'll, show that, the people who jump the gun like that, they have a lot of humbling to do. And and it shows that, what you see and what you hear on the news is not always necessarily correct.
Yeah, and, it's interesting because I don't know if everybody saw Ben Jealous's explanation. He basically said, well, we got the news late at night and we just had to address it immediately because it was at an NAACP function, and so we really wanted to condemn racism of any kind. It's kind of a light explanation, but it's interesting that from a perspective of people of African descent, it seems like we're always trying to condemn people for speaking about race in general. As James mentioned, she was talking about her perspective and, being someone who's experienced racism firsthand within her family and then, within her environment. And it seems like anytime we do that, we are immediately condemned. Zach, what do you think about the, let's say both the NAACP's reaction and the alleged reaction from the Obama administration?
Well, I certainly agree with what others have mentioned. The explanation that we were snookered just doesn't quite satisfy me. Highly intelligent, capable individuals working as a unit would not necessarily get snookered. I mean, I think that we have fallen down on our job, and we have left history and tactics and strategy and other insights and information to the dust heap. We marginalize scholars and intellectuals and thinkers, and information itself, even though we live in an information society. And we have become beholden and enslaved to a system that was not dictated for us, was not created by us in terms of the media industrial complex, and we're beholden to it. And so we, just like drinking Starbucks coffee, are, on a kick and a high, and unless we can fit into their framework, we, in many ways, feel left out. And so we begin adopting their tactics and their strategies and wonder why we can't operate and mobilize and grow and develop a black nationalist movement. Well, it's right there. To be able to develop your own thing, you have to not only understand yourself, but how you relate to other folk. And I think that's been left out of the equation. We have forgotten the tactics of Martin Delany. We have forgotten the tactics of Ella Baker. We don't employ those. We think that's just something for the recitation of historical facts and dates, but there is a living history, Manning Marable tells us, that is embedded in all of those things that can be revived and used for our time based on our context. And see, someone mentioned earlier, this is what Roger Ames and other folks did with regard to the whole civil rights movement. They took the strategy out. They took the fangs of that out, and the venom out, and they put in their own. They used the sort of pieces around it, and they amped it up, and they, updated it for the times. We haven't updated things, and we haven't created a broad-based tent. We, in many ways, only allow certain groups to participate within, a certain framework, and we're isolated, we're alienated, as Cornel West talked about. We backbite, we don't trust each other, we don't work together until it's a crisis, and so we oftentimes running, scrambling whenever a crisis happens, and even the whole discussion of issues of policy or even issues that matter is relegated to what the news media determines is important. If you look at CNN, MSNBC, even with this progressive stuff, all these channels, they are not looking out for the best interests of black or African people, so why are we looking to them to get our